Hey everyone, it's Sarah Hagen, the Director of Artist Relations for Zildjian, and I'm here. I'll be joined in a few minutes by Gavin Harrison. Hey everybody. Gavin's going to join in a couple of minutes, and in the meantime, I just want to remind everyone to go to Zildjian.com and sign up for the Z Club because it's fun and you get exclusive content. So definitely do that when you can. And let's see, it looks like Gavin is in. And we'll get him on in just a minute.
Hey there.
Hey, how are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing good, thank you.
Let me turn you up because I'm going deaf in my old age.
No. Oh, it's so good to see you.
Yeah. Hair's getting longer.
Yeah, right? Nobody to cut hair anymore. Everybody's hair is getting longer.
I haven't had a haircut in 14 weeks, it seems.
Right? I know. For me, it doesn't matter so much because it just gets longer and it's fine. Oh, it's great to see you. First of all, I want to wish you a happy birthday tomorrow.
Thank you.
Big, big day. Will you have a quarantine party?
Quarantine party where I do nothing. Yes. Yeah. I'll probably be working, Sarah, to be honest.
That's good. That's a good thing. Maybe a little cake, little candles, maybe. We'll send you a cake. We'll bake you a cake, Gavin.
Okay. A virtual one.
Right. I'll send you a cake emoji. That's what we do nowadays. Oh, I love it. So let's get started on our interview. I wanted to kind of start out talking about how you started out, and how you kind of came into the groups that you're playing with now. So maybe just give us an idea of how you started playing and what age and all of that.
Yeah. I mean, I was about 6 years old. My dad was a trumpet player, so I tried to play the trumpet. I love to play the trumpet. I wish I could play now, actually. But it was one of those things that was just, I didn't have any aptitude for it. But I was very coordinated as a kid, and I was in dance school when I was 6. And so my dad would have friends come around the house, and sometimes they would play, and I would be fascinated with the drummer, probably because of the movement thing.
Mm-hmm.
And, they were all very encouraging to me. My parents were very encouraging. My dad's friends were very encouraging. And the guys would give me little, pairs of sticks and things. And it was wonderful. So I just knew at age 6 I was going to be a drummer. And that was it. And then when I left school at 16, I started working professionally. And, I started off at the bottom and just went sideways. I worked as a sort of, I kind of entered the business in a very old way, which was being a reader, being employable from the point of view that I would do gigs where I would get called by band leaders who would say, come on Friday night in Norwich Town Hall and wear a black bow tie and a white jacket. And I would just turn up with my drums and then have to sight read the music. I didn't know what kind of music it was going to be. I didn't know any of the other players in the band. It was terrifying. But that was like the end of an old era of musicians like my dad working in that way. And I didn't really get started in a more modern way, making like pop sessions till I was about 18, 19 maybe.
Wow. Yeah. So you kind of came in and jumped in and worked hard, and that's pretty great. And that is kind of the way that it used to happen,
Yeah.
and it does sound a little bit nerve-wracking, but I'm sure that set you up for any situation that you'd be put into that was a little bit nerve-wracking, right?
Yeah, and later on when I did end up in bands, the stories that I tell them are they look at me in amazement, that I would go to a session with an 80-piece symphony orchestra and I would be playing drums and there would be a conductor and I didn't know any of the music. And guys in bands, or the bands I was in, just like, that's just crazy. Who can do that? And that's how I used to work. I used to work, you know, literally as a drummer who could try to play anything, and try to read and play different styles and do, you know, weddings and kind of parties, and, you know, depping on the subbing on the shows in London, in the pit under the stage, with conductors and semi-classical setups with string sections and brass sections. It was really like something from the last century. Well, it was the last century. But that's kind of the business that my dad had been part of since he started in 1951. That was how musicians were employed. You know, by the time I was getting into it, at least, you know, I had a chance to meet some of my dad's friends, and I had seen shows, I'd seen gigs. You know, my dad would take me to sessions. He took me to, my dad used to work in a nightclub in London called the Talk of the Town, and it was a Vegas style London cabaret club. You know, and I would go along in the afternoon and meet Louis Belson, sat on his drums and had a little kind of 5 minutes with Louis Belson. I went there when Stevie Wonder was rehearsing with his band. I saw all kinds of drummers and professional situations, as well as sessions. My dad would take me to recording sessions, and I just sat there and soaked up the whole professional musician thing, and how people behaved and how they worked, and how they worked with a red light on for recording, and they read, and there was a conductor. So far away from what I ended up doing later on, you know, with Porcupine Tree and Pineapple Thief and King Crimson, a completely different world.
That's amazing. And I'm sure it kind of set you up for that, you know, having that traditional background and knowing how to interact with other musicians, recording process and all of that too. That's pretty fantastic. And so then when you did get into, you know, playing with the groups that you play with now, how did that, you know, just your career from Porcupine Tree to King Crimson to Pineapple Thief, how with Porcupine Tree, was that the first group that you were in where it was like your group basically?
Yeah. It was the first time I was a band member. You know, I'd been working for lots of different artists and going on tours, and you know, and then when the end of the tour, the artist went back home, and that was the end of the job. Mm-hmm. Next, they might call you 18 months later when they've got a new album and they want to do a new tour. So when I got offered the chance to join Porcupine Tree, I thought, man, these guys don't know anything. they were coming from such a different place to me. I was at that point, I thought, you know what, I'm going to give this a go, because I've been a side man, a session man, a gun for hire for, at that point, well, I don't know, what, 25, 30 years. So, all right, let's see what it's like to be in a band. Let's see what that's like. And, you know, obviously you've got a lot more emotional investment in a group. The name of the band and the songs and the production and the writing and the whole, you know, you're much more involved in it. So even though in the beginning of Porcupine Tree, we made no money at all, and we played to pretty small audiences. In fact, the first gig I did was at the Middle East Club in Boston.
Oh, nice. Very nice. Yeah. Yeah. It's still there. Yes. Yeah.
And there was about, I don't know, 20, 30 people.
Wow.
And that was a shock to me, because I'd been working with this Italian guy called Claudio Baglioni, who in Italy is enormous. We're playing like Olympic Stadium, 92,000 people. And I go from that with a limo and a 5-star hotel. I go from that to on a really horrible, cheap tour bus, sleeping on a tour bus and playing in front of 30 people with these 3, 4 other guys in a very tiny club in Boston. So it was a real shock. The idea of being in a band, you know, kind of felt like a massive step down professionally.
Right. But now, you know, touring, I'm sure, with Porcupine Tree, you would just sell out, you know, the venues that you would go to, and there's a rabid fan base, and we put the call out to get some questions from, you know, the people and who are going to watch, and send in your questions. What do you want Gavin to answer? And so many people ask the question, what is going on with Porcupine Tree? So we have to ask that question.
So, well, nothing's going on with Porcupine Tree is the truth. We haven't given up. We're still friends. We went out for dinner the other day. Me, Richard, and Steve did. I see Steve quite a bit because he lives near me. I mean, not in the last 8-9 weeks, but you know, every couple of months, every few months, we'd meet up for lunch, and you know, it's not something that's going to happen very suddenly, or even ever again. But you know, we haven't given up on the idea of it, but nothing's happening at the moment.
Okay, so we did answer the question. The question of the day, I called it. So, and then, you know, tell us a little bit about King Crimson, because I think that you have a cool story about your start in King Crimson, and how you kind of came into the band and where you were coming from at the time.
Yeah, well, of course, we met Robert Fripp because he very kindly agreed to open for Porcupine Tree.
Mm-hmm.
He did his soundscape thing, which is normally 20 to 30 minutes of very slow moving, gentle sound. It didn't always go down very well because I don't know what people expected of him. And I remember one night we were standing in the wings watching him, and it wasn't going very well, and people were shouting rude things at him. And he walked off, and he walked directly towards me, and he said, "I do like a strong reaction."
That's a good attitude right there.
He was kind of getting slow hand clapped and booed, and quite a lot of unpleasant words thrown at him. So anyway, we got to know Robert, and Robert got to see me play every night. And then he said, look, I don't want you to leave Porcupine Tree, but when there's a gap, tell me when there's a good gap. I'd like to invite you into King Crimson. And I said, wow, okay, that'll be fantastic. And he said, it's 2 drummers, you and Pat Mastelotto, and Adrian Ballou, and Tony Levin, and of course, Robert. And I said, wow, that's great. So he came round to my house and he said, look, here's a list of the songs I want you to learn. I said, right, can I stop you there, Robert? I haven't got any of your songs. I actually didn't grow up being a King Crimson fan. So he said, that's fantastic, because I want you to approach it completely new. Approach every song like it's a new song, regardless of when it was written. Don't learn the drums from the original record, which is hard, because when you're learning a song as a drummer, you kind of learn what the drums do. Mm-hmm. He said, learn the song, but don't learn the drumming, and play whatever you like. I mean, really play whatever you want, and arrange, you know, you and Pat work together and arrange how you're going to play. So we rehearsed for 7 weeks in Nashville, not 7 weeks continuously, in 3 slots. And every morning, Pat and I would go in and just try different patterns and try different ideas. And then Robert, Tony, and Adrian would come in the afternoon, and we would rehearse. Unfortunately, that version of the band wasn't very long-lived. And then it took until 2013 for Robert to imagine a new version of King Crimson. And he phoned me up and he said, I've had this vision, 3 drummers at the front of the stage and everyone else on a riser behind. What do you think? And I said, well, yeah, could be very interesting, Robert. And he said, well, I'd like to invite you into this version of the band, and I think it's going to be a great project. And so we set off without really knowing what we were going to do, and trying to arrange the drums for, you know, for 3 drummers for the songs. So that was a very interesting rhythmical challenge, really.
I bet. but you all, you know, you fit together so well. It's pretty amazing, you
Yeah,
know.
and it evolved. The how we started off on the in the first rehearsals to how we ended up on the first shows were different. And I think from 2014 right up to the end of last year when we were still playing, the band evolved all the time. You know, we changed arrangements. There were different songs. We did different versions of the same songs. And Robert always encouraged me to keep, you know, pushing the boundaries of what three drummers could do. And that's a pretty hard challenge, actually.
I absolutely can imagine that, and I feel like you know, it's pretty genius to think about the songs in a different way, and also for him to want the songs interpreted in a different way, right?
And I think that's the nice thing about Robert is that he's very good at having a big idea. When you have a good big idea, filling in the details is easy.
Mm-hmm.
When you start with the details, they don't always add up to a good idea. So Robert starts with a very big, good idea, and then we have to work out the details of making it possible.
Mm-hmm.
It's, and I've, believe me, I've tried from the other side, starting with the details, and it doesn't always add up to something good. And you can have a lot of fantastic details, but it doesn't always add up to a great thing.
Right, I can see that for sure. Um, and then to talk a little bit about Pineapple Thief. What is going on there? What are your plans?
Well, we've just finished a new album. We've been working on it on and off for a year. It's going to come out, ooh, I don't know, late August or September or something.
Oh, great.
We've finished the record. That took a long time. Just right at this very moment, we're making a special edition. There'll be a special edition of the album for the collectors, which is a book, which has got lots of nice artwork in it, and it will have 3 discs. The album, the surround sound disc, which will also have high quality, the 24-bit 96K versions of the songs, and then there'll be an extras disc. So I'm currently making very, very weird versions of some of the songs. It's like a remix idea.
I
And
love that.
yeah, I've been going crazy with my marimba here.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. Oh, I love playing marimba, and I've got my Nord pads here, which are great fun too. So I've been I'm no marimba player, believe me, but with the chance of a bit of you know, digital editing and about 1,000 goes at every line, I can just about do it.
That's amazing though. I think you know, everyone watching will be excited about the opportunity to get like a special edition with additional content. It's pretty cool. And I don't
Yeah,
know, I mean, I'm definitely like the person who loves to like own a physical CD, you know. I little, you know, I love records. I love the liner notes. I love the special things, and you know, and the limited editions, because just having something that has some additional content in it is super cool. So that's really exciting, and I love that you just showed us a little glimpse of where you're working, and I could see some drums behind you in the background. Do you have your full setup back there?
let me give you a little tour of my studio. So this is my
Great.
control room. Right now, I've got the drums here. You can see the drums there. And
Yes.
what I do is I've got the marimba here. Now, very luckily, myself and Hannah, we found this amazing house, which has like a village hall in the middle of the house. I don't know if that makes any sense to you.
Wow.
About 50 foot high, and it's about 40, 50 foot wide. So I play drums in this room here
Mm-hmm.
with the doors wide open. So I've got a totally dry drum sound in there. And then out here in this ambient room, I've got these microphones set up. So I capture the ambience and I can mix that with the dry drums. So
Wow.
it gives me a lot of possibilities in the drum sound that I want. If I want, you know, a really big, heavy John Bonham sort of sound, I can achieve that from the room. If I don't want to use the room, the close mics on the drums just sound like a dead, dry drum booth.
Wow.
So, you know, I'm really into mixing the drums too. So on the Pineapple Thief albums, I mix the drums, send it to Bruce. He's mixing everything else, and he puts in my drum track. So the amount of ambience and the balance of the drum are exactly as I want them, because sometimes it happens that when you give all your files to another person to mix, they mix it in a way that you didn't really play.
Mm-hmm.
The bass drum too loud, toms are really quiet, or cymbals are too loud, or something. It's like, wow, I didn't play it like that. So only the drummer really knows how you play the song, and you know, you sort of play the mix. So I've got full control of that with the setup I've got here, and the live ambient room out here.
That is amazing. It's just, wow. That's incredible. And if you wanted to throw a giant party, you have the space to do it too. So, you know, once the pandemic has ended, you can throw a giant party in your
Yep.
in your space.
Very unusual house. It was built for a sculptor in 1892, and he built this large hall, and that was the only thing that was here. And eventually he built, or whoever the subsequent owners were, they built a house around this big hall. So it's kind of all on one level. There's one room that's upstairs, but there's just one bedroom upstairs. Everything else on what we would call a bungalow in the UK. So it's all one, so you know, we never go up and down the stairs, really. It's all just one level. And it's a completely unique house. But when we found it, we went, oh, wow, it's unbelievable. Because like so many drummers, my dream was always to have somewhere where I could play the drums. And I went from an apartment, I went from a house that was attached to another house, right, and then I went to another semi-detached house, and I tried to pad out the garage, and that didn't work. And then I was hiring rehearsal space in rooms, and I was on practice pads. And my dream was one day to have a house where I could play the drums and hopefully record the drums. So when we found this house in 1997, I was like, that's it. Got to have this house, and never moving.
That's pretty amazing. You know, and being stuck in the house, it's a pretty ideal setup. Love it.
You know, and I feel really bad. I mean, in this last 8-9 weeks, people have been stuck at home. A lot of people can't play the drums at home. You know, they're on the pads. They've got the L80 cymbal. So they're kind of, and it's frustrating. I've been there. I spent many times just on a practice kit, and you know, it's really frustrating because you want to play your drums all the time. There are things you do. There are kind of coordination things you can work on, but it's never the same as actually playing the acoustic drums. So
Right.
I'm absolutely blessed that we found this place and that I've got somewhere I can play.
Yeah, it's amazing. And speaking of the drums and the cymbals, we have a lot of questions about your setup and your preferences and all of that. We had a question. What is your favorite cymbal? Do you have a favorite cymbal?
A favorite cymbal? It goes in periods. You know, when I was with Porcupine Tree, I played the 20-inch K Rock on everything, and I loved it. It was just like the perfect cymbal. When I started playing with 05 Rick, we did a project together, and that ride didn't feel the perfect ride for that project. And I started using the 21-inch K Custom Complex, right, and I love that cymbal too. And I bought some very old K Istanbul, made in Istanbul Zildjian cymbals from eBay, and they're the hi-hats that I'm using, and I absolutely love them. I mean, I can't quite match it. And that's not to say that I use everything, because some songs they just don't sound right on.
Mm-hmm.
So having a nice selection of cymbals is good when I get a project to play on. One of my very first thoughts is what cymbal sound would suit this song, and usually what kind of snare drum would I use with this kind of piece. The bass drum and toms, they sort of never change, but the snare drum might change, the hi-hat change, and the ride might change depending on the song or the mood. And occasionally I change crashes. I sort of got the same kind of setup, but you know, things can change a little bit.
Mm-hmm. So mostly the hi-hats and the ride can switch out, and
Yeah, because you're playing those all the way through the song, probably.
mm-hmm.
Of the hi-hat and or the ride is going to really be fundamental to the song, because it's going to be driving the song. And if it's the wrong ride sound or the wrong hi-hat sound, it's just going to really annoy me. And sometimes I will, someone sends me a track, I will do a little test. You know, I'll maybe play half the song, listen back and think, no, that ride's not right. I'm going to use the other ride, or the K high definition ride, or I'm going to use the my really old rock hi-hats. And I'll do a few minutes, I'll just record a few minutes and make all the sound decisions early on, because there's no point recording, developing the part, getting right to the end of the piece, and then thinking, yeah, the ride's not right. I don't want to do it all in. So I've got to get the sounds right first. The sound of the drums and the cymbals have got to be right for the song at the beginning. I don't want to have to later on go back and replace it all. That would be a drag.
Absolutely. And I just wanted to ask, I know the answer to this question, but I have to ask this about the cup chimes. Your very special, very, very special cup chimes. Can you tell the people watching about how those came about?
Yeah, in fact, why don't I have a little look at them? Many years ago, this is what we're talking about. I don't know what that sounds like on Instagram, but
Yeah, not bad.
many years ago, I was very curious about having little bell cymbals, and you know, Zildjian didn't make cymbals like that. They made I think quite a large bell cymbal at the time, and I thought, you know what, I've got so many, well, a few Zildjian cymbals in my garage that I'd had since the 70s, and I'd broken the edge, but the bell was fine. So I got a Sharpie, I went round it, and I very crudely cut it with tin snips. They're kind of like metalwork scissors.
Mm-hmm.
That's work. And then I devised a way where I took the top of a cymbal stand and I jammed it into a drill, and then this very roughly cut circle that was hardly even a circle, I put it onto the top of the cymbal stand and tightened it really hard with some thick felts. And then I got some metalwork, what do you call it, emery cloth, metalwork sandpaper, and with a drill, I got goggles on and trying to make this thing. I really wouldn't recommend it. It's actually very dangerous. Bits are flying off in your face. You could have a terrible accident trying to make them. Later on, I found a local blacksmith who'd got lathes and stuff. So for a few pounds, I would take an old cymbal, put a mark round, and I say, okay, can you cut this with your lathe? And he would do that, and it would be perfect. And if I would start off about 6 inches, and if I didn't like the sound of it, I would just reduce it. And then until I found a sound, I almost made one that I didn't like. And because they were originally, I think what Zildjian called the medium bell, which used to be 13 to 17 inch crashes had the medium bell. I think a lot of hi-hats have the medium bell too.
Mm-hmm.
And when I cut them down, they were in a beautiful zone between a splash and a crotale. I didn't want splashes, and I didn't want so much pitch in it that they were starting to sound tuned sometimes. You know, I didn't want to have to think, oh, hang on, what key are we in? Is it C sharp? So can I play a D? No, that sound horrible. You know, I don't want to be worried about the pitches. So they kind of just found this really middle zone between being the pitchy end of a crotale and the splashy end of a splash. So somewhere in the middle, the pitches, they are in pitch, but it's not so definite that it starts to bug you, that they sound out of tune, or they're the wrong notes for the chord. So I just, by pure luck, found the just by pure luck, by nothing but experimentation, just found the right tone. And then, of course, later on, I showed them to Paul Francis, and he has made me a couple of sets, and I think he's made some sets for other people too on sort of order. But I do get a lot of questions about them, and it's kind of, I suppose it's part of my thing. And having them above my hat meant that they were always there for just little embellishments during a song. Normally I'd wait for a time where the singer isn't singing, you know, wait till the line of the song's gone down, and then I might just tickle a couple of them and seem to work. So I guess I started doing it, I think, late 80s. And it just seemed to sort of became my thing, that I would always have these little bells. You know?
Yeah, it's definitely a signature. You know, you can hear it in your music, and it's so, you know, it's just a nice color. It's a nice additional color, right? But disclaimer: don't try that at home. Don't don't try what Gavin did. But
I really wouldn't recommend it. It's dangerous.
No. And we just had some questions come up, a few different questions come up through the scrolling questions at the bottom about tuning. And I know that you're very specific about the tuning of your drums. Can you give some tips about that?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I always tune the bottom head a bit tighter than the top head. I guess I tune them a little bit higher than I tend to hear most people. When I go on YouTube and I watch people demoing their kits, I always think, ooh, they've tuned them a little bit too low for my liking. I think there's a moment where there's a nice pitch comes out. I've never been one for having the sort of thuddy, 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 blub, 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 sort of, you know, heavy dancing, super low tuning, lots of gel. That's not me at all. I always wanted a very sort of harmonic sounding thing, much like the concept of bells, actually. I didn't want the drums to have a pitch where you think, oh, hang on, that's C sharp. What's that? That's a B flat, isn't it? I didn't want to worry they were kind of too much of a pitch that was going to get in the way of the music. But I wanted them to have a very pleasing harmonic kind of sound to them. And, you know, over the years, I guess, developed a sound on toms which I recognize as part of my sound. I like a very pure sound, but it's always with, you know, 8, 10, 12 across the front. If I had 10, 12, 13, I would tune differently. If I just moved all my toms along, if I took the 8 out of the way and then moved the 10 and 12 along and then put the 13 in, the 10 and 12 wouldn't be right. The 8, 10 and 12 are right in their position. In isolation, they might sound very weird. So unless you're using 3 toms across the front, if you copied my tuning of my 12-inch tom, and that's part of your 12, 14, 18 setup, it probably wouldn't work. It's an overall concept about the 5 toms and the way that they relate to each other and the melodies I can play on them. I also try to not play too much on one drum. I tend to play more the broken kind of fills, like I'll play the 12 and the 8 and the 15 and the 10. I do those kind of fills a lot. So you hear the note rather than killing the note by playing 100 notes on the 12-inch tom. That changes the sound of the drum so much. So I tend to do quite a lot of single hits, but not like not so much both hands on the same drum at the same time. So it's a kind of marimba type technique, and I do the same thing with the bells. I can't really play 2 or 3, 4 notes on the same bell at the same time, because you don't hear the following notes after the first one. So if you've got 5 bells, it's better that you sort of play, 1, 3, 4, and 5. And I do the same thing with the toms. That way you can hear the pitch and the drum sort of speaks.
Sure, you're letting it resonate.
Yeah, I'm not someone who plays super fast, so I don't need the drums to be dead so I can get in a lot of notes. I'd rather play much less notes and let the sound of the drums go. I mean, that's just style of playing.
That's amazing. And we went on that clinic tour together all those years ago. So it seems like forever ago now. But I had the pleasure of watching you set up your kit every night, every day, for each clinic. And I thought it was amazing because you were in a different city every day with a different kit.
That's right.
And so not to bring back tough memories of trying to make it happen with a different kit every day, but it was really amazing to watch you make that kit sound like you every time.
Yeah, and I think some of it is in your touch, the way that you actually hit the drum, the way you strike the drum. I've been, I guess, since about 1993, I switched to using coated heads because I thought that my touch meant that I could bring the sound out of the drum. Maybe there is an absolute tiny fraction of a moment where the stick tip hits the white coated head and you're kind of picking the sound out. You can see when you put clear heads on, you can see all kind of marks on the drum, like skid marks, where your stick has glanced to the drum and it leaves on a clear head, it leaves a little sort of skid. And I think in a way, maybe with a coated head, it helps me get sound out a little bit more, like I'm sort of drawing the sound out, picking the sound out. When I was a kid and I used to read drum magazines in the UK, including the Ludwig drummer in the 60s, one of my early drum teachers gave me his collection of the Ludwig drummer. And drummers back then were talking about pulling the sound out of the drum, whatever that meant to them. And I think that's what it meant to me in terms of the way that you hit the drum is really part of your sound. And I know I've proved that because I've done studio masterclasses in a recording studio with 12 students, and they've all come and played my drums, and we've recorded the same song on in the control room and listened. And wow, every drummer of those 12 drummers made my kit sound different. It was the same drum, sometimes with the same stick, same. We didn't change the mix, and just the way they hit my drums brought out a different tone. So yeah, part of it is actually the way you hit the surface,
Absolutely. And while you have your stick in your hand, let's talk a little bit about your stick. Give us an idea about how that was created, if you don't mind, and why. Sure.
Yeah. Well, I was very happy to be invited to do a signature stick with Vic Firth, of course. I'd been playing Vic Firth since, 1983. My very first trip to the States in 1983, where I came to the Zildjian factory, I went to some drum shop. I can't remember the drum shops back then. Was it called Jack's?
Yes, Jack's.
Yeah. And I bought some of these beautiful American hickory sticks. made by Vic Firth. I hadn't seen any of those in my local town. I live in a suburb of London. We had a music shop. I'd never seen any Vic Firth sticks, and I went into Jack's and I thought, oh, these are nice. So I got some Vic Firth sticks, and pretty much, as far as I can remember, I played them ever since when I could get them. And then I was lucky enough to be given an endorsement in the mid-90s. And then, when was it now? Maybe eight years ago, together with Neil at Vic Firth, we designed this stick. It's sort of based on the rock model. I was using the rock model with Porcupine Tree. That had the Vic grip. And that the last tour we did, 2009, 2010, I was using the rock model with the Vic grip. And then after that, I said, well, okay, let's start with the rock model, but I want it a bit longer, and I want this special tip, the grip. So it's a dream to my own stick. It's fantastic. They're very big.
Yes.
They're very, very big. People write to me and say, how can you play with these tree trunks? They're baseball bats. But in the early 80s, I used to go and watch a drummer in London called Tony Beard. Absolutely amazing drummer. He was the hottest in town. And whenever I heard Tony Beard was playing, I would go there and watch. And I saw Tony was using these massive sticks. And I thought, how does he get all that beautiful control and power from? And then I got curious enough to get some bigger sticks. And I thought, yeah, that's the way I'm going to go. I'm going to go with the big sticks. I know they're massive. They're much bigger. You know, when I meet other drummers, I did a thing with Dave Weckl, Steve Smith, Chris Coleman, and Peter Erskine, the drum fantasy camp.
Mm-hmm.
And we were a jam in one of the rooms, and I was looking around for some sticks, and I picked up Peter's sticks, and then I picked up Dave's sticks, and I thought, wow, I can't play with these. They're tiny.
Right. Well, you're tall. You're a tall guy, you know,
Yeah.
with longer arms, so it really makes a lot of sense
I've got
for you. Big hands, yeah.
So 7/8s actually, okay, if I'm playing jazz or something, 7/8s are great. But if I'm trying to play rock with 7/8s, that's really going to hurt. They're going to be so thick. That's going to hurt me when I hit the drums.
Mm-hmm. Yep, that makes a lot of sense. And the tip, can you just do a little close up on the tip too? Because it's interesting the way that it's more integrated into the neck of the stick.
It's a sort of marching stick. I think Aaron Spears has got a similar tip.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of integrated. That's right. Mm-hmm. We tried a few different tips, and that was the one I liked. And that was the one I liked the sound on the cymbals, and I liked the way I could play the toms with this tip. I've never been a fan of nylon tip, so I wanted to go with the wood tip. And they're a dream come true.
Yeah. And then we just want to ask you some playing questions. We had a bunch of questions, like really kind of specific. So let me just ask you a few of these. There are a couple about Porcupine Tree songs. One of them was, what is your favorite song to play? Your favorite Porcupine Tree song. And then the other question is, and maybe this is the same answer, but what is the hardest Porcupine Tree song to play?
Oh, well, some of them are difficult. There's a song called What Happens Now, and we tried a very, very difficult rhythmical sort of illusion at the end of the song. At least it was difficult for us at the time. It was the hardest thing we tried to play. There was a song called Futile that was very hard to play. But actually the hardest song to play is a song called Anesthetize. And not because it's difficult to play, but it's 17 minutes long. And the first 6 are all on the toms, like tribal toms. So you do that for 6 minutes and your arms are coming up like this. I mean, just playing, especially floor toms, a lot of pattern. 6 minutes of that. By the time you get to the second part of the song, which is the sort of heavy, complicated part of the song, Matt, your arms are up like this, and it's quite a disadvantage physically, I had to really be in shape to play that song. Luckily, the third part of the song is a ballad where I could have a rest. But, you know, that was really the most physically difficult song to play. As far as favorite, I don't know. There were some songs I liked at the time. There's a song called The Sound of Music. I've played it so many times. I don't really enjoy hearing it anymore. I've heard millions of people make covers of it.
Such a great song. That was one of the ones that you played on the clinic tour, I think.
That's right.
Yeah.
If I clinic, everyone expects me to play it. So I say, oh well, if they really, really want it, all right, I'll do it. And it is fun to play. It's a fun song. I've just played it a couple of thousand times. There's some other pieces that were nice. I don't know. The enjoyment sometimes was just playing them in the atmosphere of a live concert. And some nights, the way the audience was and the lights and the mood, there was some magic happening in the room.
Yes.
It just felt like even a boring sort of ballad song suddenly sounded amazing in this hall at that moment in time with that audience. You know, the audience makes a big difference to the enjoyment for the band.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, when the audience are really, really, really loving it, you can feel it on stage, and you do sort of get quite enthusiastic about playing to some audience.
I bet. We have people asking you to play Anesthetize right now. So one of the questions that I thought was a great one was, how do you create unique drum parts for all of the songs that you write? Do you have a process for that?
Yeah, a little bit. I was thinking about it the other day. I could probably write a book of my thought process. It's about rhythmic structure. And you've really got to go back to what is the point of everything. You know, going right back to the history of music and the concept of a downbeat and the concept of a backbeat, and when that appeared in music and coming through the 20s and 30s and 40s and equipment getting better. But you know, if you're going to, people need to have a perception of where the downbeat is. Otherwise, the music doesn't make sense. They've got to know where the one is, even if it's in odd time signature. And that's nearly always going to be a bass drum. You're going to put a bass drum on the one. And then you're probably going to put a snare drum on 2 and 4. And that's the kind of common rock way. They come up through R&B, through gospel, people clapping on 2 and 4. And then when you get rid of that, or at least when you try to start from scratch and think, can I actually play this song without putting a bass drum on the 1 and without putting a snare drum on 2 and 4? Even if I save that for later in the song, the actual structure of where you're going to divide where you're going to divide the beats, how you're going to express the subdivisions, if you're going to play 8s or 16s or triplets. And of course, when you get into odd times, into 7 and 13 and 11, there isn't a 2 and 4. Well, there is a 2 and 4, but there's no rules. We can put the backbeat wherever you want. You can try putting the backbeat on the second beat of 7, or the third beat of 7, or the fourth beat of 7. And you should try all that, because all of them will suddenly give a completely different perspective of the song. Like if you're playing in 3/4 and you're playing a bass drum on 1, where are you going to put the snare drum? You're going to put it on 2, you're going to put it on 3, you're going to put it on 2, and suddenly you've got 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, and 3, 1, 2, and 3, 1, 2, and 3, boom, dat. You've got 6, 8. And that will make the audience nod their head in a different way than if you put the bass drum on the 1 and the snare drum on the 3, or the snare drum on the 3 and. You know, suddenly it's like when you're playing a rhythm where people are expecting a snare drum on 2 and 4, and you put the snare drum on 3, so it's like half time, everyone goes, ugh. everyone in the audience goes, oh, it's a plod. You know what I mean? And you can use all of those preconceptions. You can use that to your advantage. And you know how an audience reacts to a 6/8 rhythm where the bass drum's on one and the snare drum in the middle of a 6/8. And if you anticipate that snare drum by a 16, is it starting to feel a bit funky? Is it starting to feel a bit Latin? Is this starting to suggest we're getting a bit sort of African rhythm? You know, it's a beautiful thing. Just even deciding where you're just going to put the bass drum and the snare drum, then that's even before you start thinking, what am I going to kind of suggest with the hi-hat or the ride, or what sort of subdivision am I going to play with my right hand? So when I'm devising a new rhythm, I'm thinking of all these structural elements. It's like I'm building a building.
Mm-hmm.
What am I going to have on the first floor? How is the second floor going to stay up if
Mm-hmm.
not underneath it? You
Yeah.
know, think like an architect. And that way you can create interesting rhythms, work with the song that are perhaps unique. And it's hard to be unique in 4/4, and that they work with the song. They're not clever for the sake of it. And they're giving people the sense of where the one is, and they're giving people some interesting time. And then maybe later for the last chorus, just go straight, you know, with 2 and 4 on the snare and 1 and 3 on the bass drum. But earlier on in the song, I always like to find something a bit more unusual, not necessarily technically clever or speedy, but just something a bit more interesting, and
Mm-hmm.
something that's unique for that song. And that's something that I found I could do in a band like Porcupine Tree, and I could do it in a band, well, obviously in King Crimson and in Pineapple Thief, but without making the song kind of, oh, for nerdy boys only. No, I didn't want to get technical for the sake of being technical. And
Mm-hmm.
all male audience, the kind of guys who like to look at steam engines because they are interested in the complexity. I was
Mm-hmm.
never interested in being complex for the sake of it. I wanted everyone in the audience to enjoy the song, even if they weren't musicians, they weren't drummers. You know, they could feel a pulse, they could feel a groove, and they could understand where the beats are.
I love that.
It gets really interesting in odd times because, you know, in 4/4, there's only a handful of places you can put the backbeat without ruining the thing. But when you get into progressive rock and odd times, well, the sky's the limit. If you want to put the snare drum on the 1, put it there. If it makes sense musically, it can be really exciting.
That's great. That's actually really great advice too for someone who's writing from the perspective of drums, to keep the structure in mind, but then also the feeling of the music. How is it feeling to the listener, right? I love
Absolutely.
that. That's great. I love the explanation too, because it is sometimes hard to grasp, how that all comes together. It is complicated, right? So that's a good way to break it down. I like that.
And
Um,
when I go back and look at songs I've worked on, I use Logic on my computer, and
mhm,
I do the first run and I play lots of different ideas, and I save it into a folder, and then I do, I pick things that I like about it and I develop it, and then I've got a second folder and a third folder and a fourth. Sometimes I've got 20, 30 folders of ideas.
mhm.
And then years later, I might listen back to the song and I think, let me listen to what I did the very first time. Oh yeah, I quite like that actually. I didn't like it on the day, but those ideas, they're sort of, experiments.
Mhm.
Sometimes accidents happen. You play something and you listen back and think, oh my God, that was great. That was great. What was that? What was that? I'll transcribe it. And maybe that's going to be the part for that section of the song.
That's great. That's so great. So I want to keep going. I want to ask you some more questions. I know we're supposed to do an hour, but I feel like there are a few more. Do you have a little more time?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay, I'll ask you a few more questions, and if we get bumped off by Instagram when we hit the hour mark, I'll just say it now. Thank you everyone for watching, but hopefully we can actually get a few more questions in and then wrap it up before Instagram bumps us.
Okay.
So one of the questions that I loved was surrounding your influences. So someone asked, who are your influences and your drum heroes and why? And I know one in particular, but I'd love
Yeah,
you to answer that one.
Steve Gadd was my hero from when I was about 15 onwards, and he still is really. He is such a master of understatement. He was the first drummer that I realized understood minimalism. There's some jazz albums where he just plays quarter notes on a ride cymbal and nothing else
Mm-hmm.
for quite a long time. Just straightforward. No 2 and 4 on the hi-hat, nothing on the left hand, nothing on the bass drum. And it's brilliant. It's, oh man, that is beautiful. Um, I think he really understood and still understands the beauty of design. And I think that's what I loved about him so much. Jeff Porcaro was a big influence. It was exciting for me as a kid in the 70s to go to a local music shop and find American records. And there were so many records coming out that Jeff or Steve were on. It's easy to be fans of those. There were, of course, other drummers and Harvey Mason and Billy Cobham and my friend Simon Phillips, who used to live a couple of miles away from here. I guess I took influence from all of them to some degree, but just some kind of connect with your way of thinking. And Steve Gadd's way of thinking connected with mine. A drummer called Steve Jansen really connected with me. And he's really no chop meister. He's got no chops whatsoever, and he would tell you that. But he had a beautiful sense of putting beats in strength. I really love Manu Katché too. He's a beautiful designer of rhythm. The ideas he comes up with are just wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
Yeah.
there's so many drummers. It would be hard to name them all.
It's hard. It's hard. You don't want to leave people out, but you know, you can't name everybody. So, um, but I knew the Steve Gadd answer because we've had lots of conversations about Steve, and I do remember that day at the factory where we found his symbol with the notch cut out of it, and it was like
Yeah,
finding gold, right?
it's the Holy Grail.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. And we did have a couple questions about practicing your practice routine. Now I know you're recording a lot in your home studio. Do you even need to practice? Do you have a practice routine?
I don't have much of a routine. There's things I like to play on the practice pad, and maybe I could even show you the kind of things I do on a practice pad.
That would be
Can you hear that?
yeah.
So I tend to, if I'm ever in the house on my own, I bring it in front of the TV and then I do it all the way through. Turn the TV up really, really, really loud. If Hannah's home, this would be a night. I hate it. It would be impossible. So when Hannah's out, I watch the TV, I turn the volume up really, really loud, and then I tend to do this kind of thing. I like playing flams which end on a double. So, right? So I'll do that and maybe at different tempos, and I'll just kind of follow a syncopated pattern. Something I saw Steve Gadd do recently, playing a double stroke roll and then going into a single stroke roll. So I put a bit of that in there. So I'll just do that for like 20 minutes. I'll probably keep time and keep it all at one tempo.
Mm-hmm.
And that's typically what I do even backstage for 20 minutes before I go on. It's not painful to do, and it's quite kind of engaging. And I'll do that just to kind of get my muscles going. As far as on the drum set, I tend to just improvise a lot on the drums and work on ideas, work on concepts. I do a lot with the Ted Reed syncopation stuff, which probably, you know, a lot of you are familiar with. You know, this stuff, if anyone's interested, you know, there's some beautiful systems that you can play with the Ted Reed stuff. I noticed people have been asking me, where can I get this book? I noticed that Hudson Music now have a digital version, so you haven't got to wait or go to wait till the stores open. You can buy a digital version of Ted Reed syncopation, and there's some fantastic exercises. I was discussing some of this on Drummer World. I have a thread on Drummer World, and together with a few other people, we were discussing some of the systems that you can play. So I'll sit down and go through, there's 8 pages of this stuff, and I'll think of a system, and usually I can't, when I first try it, it all falls apart. So it might take me a couple of days till I can get a system and play through the whole first page without a mistake, and then I'll play pages 2 to 8, then I'll play the whole thing with a different system. It's just very, it's not boring. Sometimes practice can be so boring. This is very, very engaging, and it sounds good. So, you know, that's the kind of thing that's, you know, it's not hard to practice for an hour when it sounds good and it's engaging. Just do it like, you know, 3 hours of this and 3 hours of that. It might do you wonders, but it's torturous, you know, to keep up those routines.
And someone just commented that it's on Amazon on Kindle, so you could download it. Yeah.
It's a must-have book. It's a beautiful thing.
That's great. That's really good advice. And then speaking of advice, we wanted to know if you have some advice for aspiring drummers who are watching.
Aspiring drummers. I would say the 2 things you should work on is your sound and your timing. If you've got a good sound and you've got nice time, everyone will want to work with you. Everyone will want to play with you. If you can read, well, that could be an advantage as well. But you know, work on your sound and your timing. That's the best thing I can say. But, you know, I wouldn't say try to play 64th notes on the bass drum at 300 beats per minute. If that's what you really want to do, it's going to take you a lot to get there, and I hope you get there. But apart from a very small amount of certain types of metal music, it'll be completely useless to you in any other genre outside of that. But having a good sound and good time, that's going to be useful in every genre. And everything you do, the timing could be better, and probably your sound, and I'm talking to me here, my timing could be better, my sound could be better, and I'm constantly working on both. And when people, young drummers, say to me, what should I do? I would say work on your sound and your time. That's the thing that is going to help you for the rest of your life as a drummer.
That's great advice. That's
get some good cymbals.
Get some good cymbals. Zildjian cymbals.
Yay!
Brick Firth sticks, right? That'll help the sound for sure. I love it. Oh, well, thank you so much, Gavin. I just want to remind people to look out for that new album coming, and with some extras in it. And you said that will be, that's Pineapple Thief, and it'll be end of summer time frame?
Yeah. We're going to release a single very soon, so you'll start to get a feel of where we're going with this record. So if you follow us on social media, I'm really pretty brand new to Instagram, and I don't even know how to suggest that you follow me or like me or whatever it is you do on Instagram. But I'm coming from whatever my Instagram page is now, Gavin Harrison page. So, you know, when we've got a single, I'll make sure that it's on Instagram, it's on Facebook. You'll see it coming.
Perfect. And happy birthday tomorrow. Enjoy your day. Have a wonderful day. You deserve it.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. I will talk to you soon.
Thanks very much, Sarah. Thanks everyone for watching.
Thank you everyone for tuning in.
Okay, bye.
Bye.